When we think about colonization in Africa, we often assume it ended decades ago. But has it really? The reality is more complex and troubling than it seems. While African nations have officially gained independence, the remnants of colonial rule continue to haunt the continent. In many ways, the power dynamics have simply shifted, with former colonial powers, especially France, maintaining influence through subtle, yet deeply entrenched means. From economic manipulation to political meddling, these powers use covert strategies that keep African nations in a state of dependency. This video will delve into how colonial control has evolved rather than ended, focusing particularly on France's hidden grip on Niger. While the French flag may no longer fly over these nations, the invisible chains of control are still very much in place. Many African nations may appear to be free and sovereign, but beneath the surface, they are still tethered to their former colonizers. Independence, in many cases, is little more than an illusion. Through tactics such as political manipulation, economic dependencies, and military influence, former colonial powers continue to shape the destinies of these nations. Soft power, a tool often wielded quietly and indirectly, plays a significant role in maintaining control without the need for overt military presence. In Niger, this influence is particularly pronounced. Despite outward appearances, France's grip remains tight, using a range of strategies to maintain its influence. The use of foreign aid, strategic economic partnerships, and intelligence operations serve to keep the country within France's sphere of influence. Niger's story is emblematic of a broader reality across Africa, a facade of independence that masks ongoing external interference. France's so-called withdrawal from Niger is a prime example of the superficial nature of its disengagement. The departure of French troops and the removal of the French ambassador may seem like a step toward genuine independence, but in reality, these actions are mere symbolic gestures. The machinery of French influence, deeply rooted in Niger's political, economic, and military structures, continues to operate behind the scenes. Intelligence networks established over decades still feed information back to Paris, while key French operatives are repositioned to neighboring countries like Benin and Nigeria. Take Vincent Siar, a former operative of France's intelligence agency, as a case in point. His relocation, along with others, is not a retreat, but a calculated maneuver to keep France's hand firmly in Niger's affairs. This repositioning allows France to maintain a presence without the overt footprint of military occupation, ensuring that the flow of information and control remains uninterrupted. At the heart of France's ongoing interest in Niger lies one of the country's most valuable resources: uranium. Niger is one of the world's top producers of uranium, a critical component for France's nuclear energy industry, which powers a significant portion of the country. This economic stake is a driving force behind France's relentless interference. For France, maintaining access to Niger's uranium reserves is not just about energy, it's about power, both figuratively and literally. Even without troops on the ground, France uses its economic influence as a tool of control. A network of French companies, financial institutions, and trade agreements keeps Niger locked in a cycle of dependency. Economic coercion ensures that Niger remains aligned with French interests, as access to vital revenue streams is strategically managed to favor French companies. This manipulation of Niger's economy serves as an invisible lever of power, ensuring that France's withdrawal is never truly complete. France's reorganization of its military presence in Africa under the banner of the African Command is less a withdrawal and more a rebranding of old colonial tactics. Rather than fully disengaging, France has strategically shifted its military forces, redistributing troops and establishing command posts in new locations. This restructuring is portrayed as a partnership aimed at supporting African nations, but in reality, it serves to maintain French influence over key regions. This new command structure ensures that French forces remain positioned to act quickly when needed, all while avoiding the political backlash of direct occupation. By embedding military advisors, conducting joint exercises, and stationing troops in neighboring countries, France keeps its influence alive under the guise of cooperation and security assistance. This carefully orchestrated presence allows France to retain a strategic advantage in the region without the overt appearance of colonial control, keeping the spirit of intervention alive under a new name. Another troubling aspect of France's continued influence in Africa is the reported arming of insurgent groups. Allegations have surfaced suggesting that France is covertly supplying weapons and support to rebel forces, creating a destabilized environment that justifies a continued military presence. These actions serve a dual purpose. They keep the region in a state of perpetual conflict, limiting the ability of local governments to gain full control. And they provide France with a pretext to maintain its military operations in the area. The strategic benefits for France are clear. A destabilized region curbs the influence of rival powers, such as China and Russia, while allowing France to position itself as an indispensable security partner. However, the ethical implications of these tactics are deeply concerning. The use of proxy forces not only perpetuates violence but also undermines the sovereignty of African nations. It's a dangerous game that risks fueling further conflict and instability, with ordinary citizens paying the highest price. In addition to arming insurgents, France has been accused of manufacturing crises to justify its continued military involvement. One such incident is the alleged staged hostage situation in Benin, where French nationals were reportedly kidnapped and later rescued in a dramatic military operation. Critics argue that this crisis was orchestrated to create a narrative that necessitates France's ongoing presence, reinforcing the image of France as a savior in a region plagued by insecurity. These staged events are powerful tools in manipulating both local and international perceptions. They paint a picture of French forces as protectors, thereby legitimizing military interventions and overshadowing the true motives behind their presence. The media spectacle that accompanies these incidents often obscures the deeper political agenda, allowing France to tighten its grip under the guise of humanitarian concern. By controlling the narrative, France maintains its influence while presenting itself as a necessary force against chaos. Despite these challenges, Niger is actively resisting French influence, taking bold steps to reclaim its sovereignty. The government has launched internal security reforms aimed at reducing foreign interference, including efforts to strengthen national intelligence and counter foreign espionage. By developing its own security apparatus and forging new partnerships with nations less entwined with its colonial past, Niger is gradually breaking free from French dominance. Economically, Niger is diversifying its trade partners, seeking new alliances with countries like China, Russia, and Turkey, which offer alternatives to the traditional French-dominated economic ties. This diversification is crucial for reducing economic dependency and gaining greater control over its resources. Equally important is Niger's push to control its narrative on the global stage. By promoting national unity and highlighting its sovereignty struggles, Niger is rallying its citizens against external manipulation and positioning itself as a nation determined to chart its own course. Niger's struggle against French influence is not an isolated event. It is part of a broader, continent-wide movement to reject neo-colonial interference. Across Africa, countries are increasingly vocal about their desire to assert sovereignty and redefine relationships with former colonial powers. This shift is fueled by a new generation of leaders and activists who are determined to dismantle the lingering structures of external control that have hindered Africa's progress for decades. This growing resistance is reshaping Africa's geopolitical landscape. Nations like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea have joined Niger in pushing back against French military and economic influence, demonstrating that the old colonial playbook is losing its effectiveness. By forging new alliances with emerging global powers, exploring alternative economic models, and prioritizing local governance, African nations are slowly reclaiming their autonomy. The potential of this movement lies not just in resisting neo-colonial tactics, but in empowering African states to chart their own paths, driven by their unique needs and aspirations, rather than the agendas of distant capitals. As we have seen, the end of formal colonialism in Africa has not signaled the end of foreign interference. France and other Western powers continue to employ a range of neo-colonial tactics, from economic dependency and military presence to covert operations and political manipulation. The facade of independence masks a deeper reality of ongoing control and exploitation, with France's involvement in Niger serving as a stark reminder of how these tactics play out on the ground. However, the tide is turning. The growing pushback from nations like Niger highlights the importance of continued resistance and the power of self-determination. Supporting African sovereignty means more than just recognizing these struggles. It requires standing against neo-colonial practices and advocating for genuine partnerships based on respect and mutual benefit. The battle between former colonizers and African nations is far from over, but the winds of change are blowing. The future of Africa lies not in the shadows of its past, but in the hands of those who dare to envision a new, independent path forward.